Talk to yourself as you would to someone you love. Let's get into the episode for today. Welcome back, Uprooted community, to this platform, Uprooted, where we talk about all things faith and mental health. I am Omotoke Adewale, your podcast host, the hostess with the mostest, bringing you all things faith and mental health. I am a licensed marriage and family therapist, and I'm so glad that you joined me today. Give yourselves a round of applause. Yes, come on in. So, today we're going to talk about self talk and the ways in which we speak to ourselves. I think this is such an important topic to discuss because it is very vital in terms of the outcome and the experiences that we have in our lives. A big part of it is how we think about ourselves, how we feel about ourselves, and then how we now speak to ourselves. So, our opening quote was to talk to yourself like you would to someone you love. So many of us do not keep the same energy as we do when we are, relating with other people, when we are talking with other people, when we're showing kindness and compassion to others. For some reason, it's just so hard for us to give ourselves the same love, the same care, the same attention, the same compassion that we do with other people. And it's so vital that we learn and cultivate ways that we can, like I said, keep that same energy with ourselves, because the way that we talk to ourselves is so important, and it can impact your mental health, and it can also impact your faith, right? Because if we're constantly talking down on ourselves, if we're constantly speaking to ourselves negatively, that can dampen your faith, that can weaken your faith. It can weaken your faith in God, it can weaken your faith and belief in yourself, and it can also have a negative impact on your mental health. So it's so important that, again, we learn ways to talk to ourselves kindly. So today I'm going to just share some pointers or some things to think about when it comes to self-talk and when it comes to having and cultivating positive self-talk. So there's a scripture in Proverbs 12:6 that says, "Words build up or tear down." So that tells us that the words that we speak over ourselves, that we speak into situations and circumstances that surround us, can either lift us up or tear us down, right? So that also means the life that we're living right now, today, is a reflection of the ways in which we have spoken to ourselves yesterday, last year, last month, so to speak, right? So, what you see happening around you today, your external environment, can be a reflection of your internal environment, right? So, it's very important that we're using our words to build ourselves up and not tear ourselves down, okay? And the way you speak to yourself and about yourself holds weight, right? Uh, so many of us look for external validation. We look to other people to, lift us up, to compliment us, to validate us. But we don't do that for ourselves, right? And people can tell you how great you are. People can compliment you all day. And people can also tear you down on the opposite end of it, right? Criticize you, right? But the way that you speak to yourself, right, holds a lot of weight, right? So, because I know there are people who, there are people who compliment them, who lift them up, who say positive words to them, but the person themselves don't believe it, right? The person themselves will often dismiss, right? A good example is like when somebody compliments you, for example. Are you the type of person who would say, "Oh no, it's nothing," or you water down the compliment, or you completely dismiss it, right? Sometimes that can be an indication of your own self-perception and the ways in which you perceive yourself, and also the ways in which you speak to your own self, right? So, all that to say that the way that we speak to ourselves, it holds a lot of weight, right? And your words are powerful. They can shape your beliefs, and your beliefs can shape your reality, right? So, perception is a very, very important concept for us to think about and to navigate, right? Because what you perceive is going to be the reality that you project outwardly, right? So, if you perceive something to be negative, right, you're going to is going to be projected in your reality as negative, right? So for example, what you focus on grows, right? So if you're constantly, perceiving negativity, right, around you or in your relationships in your life, then more than likely you're going to see that in reality. Sometimes it can be like that self-fulfilling prophecy as well, right? And reality is subjective, right? So meaning the negative reality that we've painted for ourselves a lot of the time is not fact, right? So something can be true, but it's not the truth, right? Something can feel true, but it doesn't make it a fact, right? And again, it's how we perceive it. And sometimes we don't see what we're praying for because we actually use our thoughts and our words to destroy it, right? There was something I saw before that said, the scripture that says, no weapon formed against me shall prosper, right? And there was something that said that sometimes some of us are the weapons against ourselves that's forming, causing us not to prosper, right? So meaning that sometimes we're our own enemy, right? We're our own worst critic. And sometimes we use our same mouths that we're using to pray and to believe and to have hope, and we use that same mouth, right, those same thoughts to now completely alter and change what you're praying for and what you're hoping for, right? So it doesn't mean that you don't acknowledge. I know sometimes people say, well, does that mean that I don't acknowledge how I'm feeling, or I don't acknowledge what I'm going through, or I don't acknowledge maybe the difficulty or the challenges that are in my life? No, you can acknowledge and definitely validate yourself and your experience without tearing yourself down, right? Without speaking negatively over yourself, right? So an example is, let's say you are preparing for maybe like a job interview or something like that. I'm just going to give a simple example. You're preparing for a job interview, and you did the preparation and you went for the interview, but it didn't go maybe the way that you were hoping for. It didn't go as planned, right? Maybe they didn't call you for the job, maybe they gave it to somebody else or whatever, right? So there's a way that you can validate, right, how you're feeling about that. You might be feeling let down, you might be feeling disappointed, like, because you worked so hard, you prepared for this, but it didn't go the way that you were hoping that it would go, right? And the feeling there might be disappointment, let down, etc., right? So feeling that feeling of disappointment or let down doesn't necessarily mean that you now have to turn it into a negative self-talk about yourself, right? So that might sound something like, I'm such a failure. I can never do anything right, right? Everything I do somehow just continues to crumble. Fill in the blank, right? So you see how I did that there. So there's a difference between talking to ourselves negatively and putting ourselves down versus acknowledging how you're feeling, validating your experience. So, all that to say, you can validate your experience and acknowledge how you feel without talking to yourself negatively, without talking yourself down, right? There's room for self compassion. And self compassion doesn't mean that you don't take accountability, it doesn't mean that you don't look into how a situation or experience is impacting you. You can have self-compassion again without being harsh to yourself, so to speak. So I say that to say, because I know that sometimes people will ask the question or will have the thought of, well, are you saying that I shouldn't acknowledge how I'm feeling or just validate myself? No, there's you can validate yourself, but again, without talking yourself down. Okay. um our actions and words also aligns with our desires, right? So sometimes when we have a certain desire and there's something that we are hoping for, it's important that we ensure that our words and our actions align with that. Sometimes I find, especially like in the field that I'm in, I see a lot of people say things and do things that are the opposite of what they're saying that they desire, right? So someone, can come and be talking to me as a client, and they're making comments like, "I just want to be better. I just want to be doing better. I just want to have better relationships. I want this area of my life to be better. I don't want to experience depression. I don't want to experience anxiety, right? So they say those things, and those are the things that they're desiring. Those are the things that they're wanting, especially within treatment. However, as I'm working with them, I will see them engaging in certain behaviors or saying certain words that are completely misaligned to that. Now, I know this is easier said than done. I know sometimes we can have desires, but the way that we feel or some of the actions or habits, right, so to speak, it's habits actually that we have created completely just throws the desires out the window, right? I say all this to say that it's very important for us to keep ourselves in check to make sure that what we desire matches up and aligns with how we're speaking about ourselves, right? Because the way that you speak to yourself, the way that you speak about yourself is one of the first steps and indicators to crossing that bridge of seeing the fruition, right, of what you're hoping for, right? So if you want something different for yourself, you do have to do the work of behaving differently, right? Do the work of, doing your best to speak to yourself differently, right? So the actions and the words, they they have to align for you to see what you desire. Okay. Um, and also all that to say that we also cannot rely on our emotions and our feelings. I think a lot of the times people are very reliant on how they feel, right? Um, and if you live based on how you feel, if you live based on your emotions, you're gonna sell yourself short, right? Because your feelings aren't facts. Your feelings are not reliable. You're not your feelings, right? Your feelings, they fluctuate, right? One minute you might be feeling good or having a good day, right? You woke up in a good mood, and then you're driving to work and somebody cuts you off on the road. Then you feel what? Triggered, angry, whatever the case is, right? And then maybe you calm yourself down, feeling better again. Then things just happen along the way, right? So, all that to say that we cannot live our lives, based on relying on our feelings, right? We have to be in charge of our feelings and our emotions rather than it being in charge of us, right? So even if we have experiences that happens throughout the day, throughout our lives that bring up certain feelings, that bring up certain emotions, you do not have to succumb to it, right? You can acknowledge its presence, you can acknowledge that it's there, and you know, for lack of a better word, you being the Lord over your emotions, right? Versus your emotions, you know, being in charge, right? So your feelings are not facts, right? And I think sometimes when we rely on our feelings and emotions, it can now trigger the way that we speak to ourselves. And then the way that we speak to ourselves now triggers how we behave. So they all kind of work hand in hand together. Okay. Um, and when you engage in negative self talk, feelings and circumstances are driving your life, right? Versus you being in charge of them, like I mentioned before. And what you see and hear determines the quality of your thoughts. And that determines the quality of your words, okay? So you can develop positive self talk by making daily intentional practices of hearing positive things and beginning to say positive things over yourself, right? I know out there's things like positive affirmations. Um, and, to be honest, before I really wasn't a fan of positive affirmations because to me it felt cheesy and corny, right? But I think it's important to remember that when we talk about affirming, when we talk about positive affirmations, it means stating something as fact, right? So when I talk to clients about positive affirmations, I teach them to affirm things and state things as facts that they can believe, right? And I tell them if you can't believe this thing that you're saying, don't say it. Let's reframe it into something that you can believe so that you can hold on to it, so that it can be something that you can actually work towards, right? So for example, it could be something like, when people say things like, you got this, you can do this, you're powerful, you're strong, right? Maybe there's people out there that you're not completely there. You don't completely believe that yet, right? So a positive affirmation example would be saying things like, I am learning how to find the strength within myself, right? Or maybe there's someone who struggles with loving themselves. Maybe you feel unlovable, right? Unworthy. Having a positive affirmation versus saying the opposite, right? So I always say too that positive affirmations isn't the opposite. So if, let's say, you think you're weak, or you say to yourself you're weak, you don't want to just change it to I'm strong, especially if, again, you don't believe that, right? So we want to create and cultivate affirmations that we can believe. So an example of that, so rather than saying from I am unlovable to I am lovable, you would say, I'm learning how to love myself. I'm learning how to accept and receive love, how to give love, right? Because that's something that you can see. That's something that you know that you are doing, right? So when we reframe and when we engage in positive affirmations, positive self talk, it's very important that we are engaging and cultivating practices that we can believe and hold on to, right? And the last thing I'll say about that too is, it's important for us to also, um, when we are engaging in our relationship with God and in our spiritual walk and journey, remembering that the way that you see yourself, sometimes, a lot of the times, is different than the way God sees you, right? So, one of the things that has helped me is reminding myself that even if I see myself a certain way, right, asking myself, how does God see me, right? And trying to use that as my mirror versus the negative thoughts or the negative beliefs or the negative self-talk as my mirror. I take a moment to look at myself through the eyes of God, right? What would God say about me in this situation? How would God speak to me? Is this something that, you know, God is saying is true about me or not, right? So that's another way that we can check ourselves in terms of our self talk, our self perception, is to look at ourselves through God's eyes. Okay. So, lastly, the quote, I wanted to go back to it really quick, which is to talk to yourself like you would someone you love, right? Like I said at the beginning, a lot of us, we're kinder to others when we're compassionate to others than we are to ourselves. So today I want to encourage you, right? If you are someone who you have a hard time with self perception, self image, and then in turn, you now also have a difficult time with, negative self talk or the way in which you speak to yourself, I want to encourage you to be a friend to yourself, right? Be your own friend and think about the ways in which you would speak to and treat a person that you love, right? Or think about the ways in which people who love you, people who are reliable sources, how they would speak to you, how they would treat you. And I want to encourage you to today, as you're watching this video, as you're going about your day, whatever you're doing, to speak to yourself that same way, to see yourself that same way, because you deserve that, right? The love, the care, attention, compassion, and kindness that you give to other people, the ways in which you use kind words to others, the ways in which you use your words to build other people up, you also deserve that from yourself, right? So I want to encourage you today to speak to yourself kindly, to speak to yourself with compassion, because you are a person of value. You're a person of importance, and you deserve that from yourself. You yourself deserves that from you, right? That person that is within you that maybe hasn't completely came alive yet, but is there, right? That person that you're hoping to be one day, that place that you're hoping to get to one day, is going to be dependent on the way in which you speak to yourself. So I want to encourage you today to speak life over yourself, to speak kindness over yourself, to speak love over yourself, right? Because doing that, those words that you speak over yourself is gonna be what waters, right? Thinking of yourself as a plant, right? It's gonna be what waters um, that person that you are going to be evolving into, right? So it's very important, to treat yourself with kindness. All right. That's all I have for you all today. Thank you so much for tuning in, for watching this video, for listening. Be sure to also, like I said earlier or in the previous episodes, be sure to send me your quotes, send me your scriptures, your mantras, whatever it is that you live by, words that are important to you, so that I can feature them on these episodes. So if there's anything that came to you as you were listening to this, you can put it in the comments, you can send it to me. Quotes and words around self-talk, self-perception would be appreciated. And please do make sure that you like, share, subscribe to this video, subscribe to this channel rather, and continue to also share with anyone that you believe can benefit from it. All right. And until we meet again, continue to be well, do well, and live well.